Welcome to IDT Talks. My name is Anastasia Lavrina, and today I have a special guest, Maxime Gauin, French expert, researcher at the Institute for Development and Diplomacy, and associate professor at Ada University. Welcome to IDT Talks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You have been publishing so many articles with very crucial issues, and I would like to refer to the recent article, which was also published. The title is Armenia's Unresolved Glorification of Terrorism. As you are saying, since 1991, it has enjoyed various forms of justification and glorification of terrorism by the government in Armenia. How do you think it can be explained?
First of all, Armenian terrorism, it started in 19th century with the Armenian Revolutionary Terrorist Organization, Armenian, which later became the Ramkara, and Shak and Dashnak. And it is full part of the political culture, not of the Armenians in general, of course, but of Armenian nationalist revolutionaries in particular, to practice and to glorify terrorism at the same time. So it did not start suddenly from nowhere in 1981. It was kind of importing or recycling practices which exist in the diaspora and in the short-lived Independent Republic of Armenia in 1918-1920. This is the first reason. The second reason is the expansionism at the expense of Azerbaijan, which became really dangerous in late 1980s and exploded in 1982, is inextricably linked to, is a consequence of his nationalist ideology, and expansionism and terrorism are just two aspects of the same worldview, of the same political doctrine. So from their perspective, it's only coherent to combine the two.
It seems that since 1991, they started a policy of glorification of terrorism at the state
because
level.
Armenia became independent, so we could speak about an independent Armenian state again, even if the actual independence of Armenia is debatable to some extent, but on paper at least it became an independent country.
So how is the situation going right now in Armenia?
As I explained in this policy brief, during the last 2 months, April and May, there were two contradictory events. On April 25, there was a Nemesis monument to glorify the Nemesis operation to kill former Ottoman leaders, former Azerbaijani leaders, and ethnic Armenians who were loyal to the Ottoman state and against the Dashnaks and Shaks, etc. And as I explained, as it was said in the Armenian press actually, it was unveiled under the leadership of a deputy mayor of Yerevan, who was a co-founder of the civil contract and who had been deputy Prime Minister of Armenia. So this is clear. This is at least a part of the ruling party of Armenia is clearly supporting this kind of initiative and taking part to this initiative, which is concerning. And the opposite event was the reburial of Pierre Gulmir in Armenia. Pierre Gulmir, as I explained in the paper, was the leader of the Armenian Secret Army for Liberation of Armenia, Assala, in Western Europe. He killed himself accidentally in July 1982 by his own bomb. He was preparing a bomb for a non-Turkish target in Paris, actually. He was buried near Paris, quite logically. And at the end of last year, some of his surviving friends decided to organize a reburial in Armenia, and quite logically they expect to have a ceremony paying tribute to this terrorist, because there is a special section in a cemetery of Yerevan, military cemetery of Yerevan, for the deceased Assala terrorist. So they expect the same treatment that for all the other deceased Assala terrorists. This time it did not happen. This time Nikol Pashinyan said no. In the interest of Armenia itself, he said we cannot accept such a ceremony paying tribute to a former Assala member. He did not say terrorist, but at least he acted accordingly. And all the question is, this decision, which is of course a welcome decision, will it remain isolated, or is it a pivotal movement? Is it a turning point? we cannot answer this question for the moment. But at least we can raise this question, and we can encourage Mr. Pashinyan to act like that in the future. And for example, to at least remove the monument to Suleiman Telelian, who killed former Ottoman Grand Vizier Talat Pasha. It was unveiled in 2015, so Mr. Pashinyan can say it was before me, which is true. But okay, you are the Prime Minister, so you are perfectly entitled to remove this monument. And this is a particularly hateful monument. Not only you see this terrorist, but you see the head of Talat under one of his feet.
You know, there is another question.
Mm-hmm.
From one side, Nikol Pashinyan, Prime Minister of Armenia, is saying that we should normalize relations with Azerbaijan and Turkey.
Absolutely.
Then this monument for Nemesis is coming. And then what you have already mentioned about the statements made by Prime Minister of Armenia. Then, when we speak about glorification of terrorism in Armenia at the state level, who is more responsible for this? This is diaspora. This is other powers, forces who do not want to see the peaceful development in the South Caucasus. And how is the role of Prime Minister of this country may be evaluated for the upcoming months and years?
To be fair, his situation is not simple in the sense that he arrived in power only 5 years ago in 2018, after 27 years of very nationalist, very aggressive policy, including glorification of terrorism. Armenian nationalism had been actually partly rehabilitated even before by Moscow. So he has all this legacy, but himself, he more or less played with that until the war. For example, when he said a new war, his minister, but with his permission of course, his Minister of Defense said a new war for new territories, as you know. But he saw the result. The result was the liberation of 2020. So he is a bit isolated in the top leadership of Armenia, because after all these decades, all the reasonable peoples are in exile or completely out of the political life. But he has, which is unique, which is fundamental, he has a personal interest in signing peace with Azerbaijan and Turkey, to remain in history as a man who, okay, lost the war, but won peace, which in the end is much more in the interest of Armenia. I think it was the interest of Armenia to lose the war, to understand that they cannot take the territories of the neighbors indefinitely, and their interest is signing a true peace argument with its two Turkic neighbors. So that's why the situation of Mr. Pashinyan is complicated. But observing it is complicated is not enough. Okay, your situation is not simple, but you have to act. You have to become a statesman.
You are a prime minister.
You are the prime minister. Okay, you were a journalist before. You became the prime minister. You have to act as a prime minister. You have to find the authority to act according to the own interest of your people, because spreading hatred, cultivating hatred, is not in the interest of 95% of the Armenians. It's not. It's just maintain the isolation of Armenia. It just maintain intellectual and financial misery in Armenia.
So tell us about Armenian terrorism as an obstacle for the peace-building process in the region of the South Caucasus.
There are several aspects. The most obvious, we just mentioned it. So if there is such a glorification, Baku and Ankara will, for excellent reason, be reluctant and concerning the peace treaty, will have some legitimate doubts. This is the first aspect. And another aspect I mentioned in other papers, in other interviews, is, and that's why Mr. Pashinyan, his own interest dictates him to stop this glorification, because he fears to be killed if he signs peace with Azerbaijan and Turkey. Because there are people who consider himself a traitor. He has been called a traitor since the end of 2020, even more after the Prague Declaration, where he signed that he recognized the territorial integrity of Azerbaijan, which was confirmed in Moldova recently. And just to return one moment to Nemesis, Nemesis, I said, killed loyal Armenians, loyal Ottoman Armenians. And for the extremist Armenians today, Mr. Pashinyan is hardly better than those their grandparents killed in 1920, 1921. So, at one moment, I mean, he has to find courage but courage is not enough. And at one moment, I think Azerbaijan and Turkey should come to an understanding with him on how to fix these security issues for him. I mean, as far as the territory of Azerbaijan is concerned, as far as the Turkish territory is concerned, it's only these governments who care about their citizens like they do against any kind of other terrorist threats. But as far as their possible partner in peace is concerned, they have to speak with him. What are your fears? How can we fix this issue?
So you already started to speak about the last meeting held in Moldova in Chisinau on
Yes.
1st of June, which was quite, I will say, interesting discussion between the leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan, with the participation definitely the President of France. And I'm very curious about your position and understanding of French behavior toward the situation in the South Caucasus. We know about pro-Armenian statements, we know about the role of France has played before. At the moment, how do you see and how can you explain the vision from the French perspective, the situation in the South Caucasus and the role France may play in the future?
I have to start with the past to reach the current situation and the possible future. First, I would like to emphasize one more time that France is the French government is the only one who faced a problem with some municipalities who had signed agreements with municipalities of the previously occupied territories, and who went to the court to say a municipality cannot have its own independent diplomacy in contradiction with the diplomacy of the government. So all these charters with some municipalities and some Calabar municipalities have been cancelled in 2019. A part of these municipalities appealed. In 2021, it was rejected. And last year, I insist, last year, one municipality went to the Supreme Court for administrative issues, and the Council of State, it's like in Turkey, the State Council, Devlet Conseil, rejected this last application, saying as long, I mean, in the sense that the French government does not recognize this so-called Karabakh Republic, so you cannot sign a charter of friendship with a municipality of this so-called republic. This is not the whole aspect, the whole issue, but this is an important part of the issue. So the French government was always clear, we do not recognize, we vote the 4 resolution of the UN Security Council, and we are consistent with this signature.
Yeah, but the problem was that there were some resolutions adopted by Senate in France which were calling to recognize the independence.
Yes, but it had no effect, and it was voted by opponents to Mr. Macron. It was non-binding, it was a demand, and these demands were rejected. So the diplomacy is a monopoly of the government, and the judiciary, the justice is a monopoly of the judiciary. The Senate made just a very unfortunate statement, but it is words. It is very regrettable words, but it is just words. First, it does not mean there were no errors committed by the government itself. No need to, you already mentioned that, plenty of other Azerbaijani journalists mentioned that, so all people who listen to us know it. I regret these errors, obviously. I would like just to emphasize, there were some factual errors, there was some failure of intelligence, as it always happens, unfortunately, not only in France. But there was also the will which still exists, and I'm going to mention the most recent development, the will to end the Russian and Iranian domination on Iran. So with this good intent, plenty of clumsy statements and attempts have been made. But precisely, as everybody who knows the region could expect, there are still 3 military Russian facilities in Armenia. There is still a Russian control of the Armenian airspace, and all the consequences that everybody can guess. And we could speak about Iran as well. So Mr. Macron has understood that it failed, and there is no need to overplay the big brother of Armenia, because the results are not what he expects. The only possibility to make Armenia really independent is to sign peace with Azerbaijan and Turkey. Because the so-called danger of Azerbaijan and Turkey, which is actually the opposite, but perceived in Armenia as a danger, will disappear. So in Paris, it is gradually better understood during the last months, and the disappointment concerning the Armenian government was clear in Paris during the last months.
That's interesting. If France really want to have a peace process development between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and if in Paris they understand that only peace agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia can make Armenia independent from Russia, from Iran, or from any other forces, that's interesting. Why in France there were some attempt by some senators or some policymakers to stop the process, like that meeting which were expected to happen in the last year, and then Azerbaijan definitely denied to participate if there will be President Macron also attending the event, the meeting, because of some statements made by the officials in France which aimed to support Armenia more than Azerbaijan. Then that mission, European Union mission, sent to Armenia when there were also French gendarmeries, which destroys the stereotype that this is humanitarian mission. This is 2 points which contradicts each other somehow.
We should make two distinctions. First, those were the statements were made by opponents to Mr. Macron, and what he said. The distinction is fundamental because since something which is not very well understood in countries such as Azerbaijan, Turkey, but also other countries, Morocco, etc. There was a large renewal of the French political life after Mr. Macron's election, and I'm sorry to say that a decrease of the intellectual level in the opposition. The current leadership is not what these traditional parties deserve, what their voters deserve. The bitterness blind plenty of members of the parliament, of the Senate, etc. And they use the Armenian question because they perfectly know no French government, even if themselves were in power, will ever recognize this so-called Republic of Armenia. They know that, so they advocate the opposite of what is feasible, just to poison Mr. Macron's life. Another aspect of the issue is, you mentioned the missions, but this mission is not humanitarian. This mission is about controlling the border and preventing, if possible, the incidents on the border. So it's only logical to have people who know about military. The thing is this mission efficient or not?
The first mission was not efficient, unfortunately.
I will not try to deny what you said.
And
because I don't believe you are fundamentally wrong.
The second mission, the problem was that it was not agreed with Azerbaijani side as well. The first mission was agreed in Prague. There were participation of President Aliyev, Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, President Macron, and Charles Michel. And at that meeting was agreed that the first mission will be sent to Armenia. But about the decision to send the second mission, Baku was not asked. And the position of Baku was not considered. That's why it was, I guess, the first mistake and the problem which appeared after.
Of course, it was an error. But one more time, to sign peace, you need to be true. Mr. Aliyev cannot sign peace with an empty chair. And I don't think he ever considered a single second signing peace with Mr. Kocharyan or with the Dashnak leadership.
Of course.
So, in any case, if, as we all wish here, peace is signed, it will be with Nikol Pashinyan. And these kind of missions, at least for a part, is due to the desire to maintain him in power with the fear that if he loses face in front of his own public opinion, he could collapse. Because these incidents at the border are regularly presented in Armenia as Azerbaijan is invading us. Of course, it's complete nonsense, But what is perceived as real becomes part of the reality. Not in the sense that it becomes real, but for plenty of Armenians, it is real. So, in Paris, with the best intention, they made an error, with the sense that if the majority of Armenians believe Nikol Pashinyan is not even able to protect the internationally recognized boundary, we should stop support him and we should try the previous leaders. But obviously, the method which was actually implemented is not the right method. But we should distinguish the intent and the result. Not to say, oh, if you have a good intent, we can forgive you, the result doesn't matter. No, just to appreciate exactly what happened.
So you told us about the interest of France in the South Caucasus. It's, as you are saying, intention to see the peace-building development, peace process between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but overall about interest of France in its foreign policy inside the European Union and far beyond. What can you tell us?
Very vast question. I think, especially considering the attempt to invade Ukraine and the difficulties with the United States at the end of 2021 concerning the contract of submarines to Australia, which was unilaterally cancelled by the Australian government, and the fact that the Australian government changed recently, there are several key priority issues. First, to reinforce the political component and military component of European Union, to find a kind of understanding with Poland, because Germany was a bit disappointing. So Poland and Italy are considered, even if there are big political differences between the rightist government of Warsaw and Rome and the French government, they are, and it is understood that they are necessary. So to find this agreement and to find a way to reinforce the military component of European Union in relieving the countries of Eastern and Central Europe who trust a lot the NATO and America. So this is visible in Mr. Macron's last speech concerning these issues. So this is one of the priorities. Another priority is to repair the ties with Australia, and more generally to find understandings with India and Indonesia. India and Indonesia, partly because of China, partly because of the ambitions of China, and partly to dissuade India and Indonesia to buy too much Russian oil, and Indonesia to develop too much the trade with Russia, to avoid a bypass of the international sanctions. And also more generally because the Pacific area is becoming increasingly important in the world. This is something very obvious. And France possesses island in the Pacific Ocean, as you know, the New Caledonia and Polynesia mostly.
Indeed, there is big plans. And the final question to sum up what we have discussed today, what France will get after Armenia and Azerbaijan sign a peace treaty? Apart from independence of Armenia, as you say.
Of course, but it will largely depend on what the French government will be able to do and how it will be understood in the South Caucasus. I think the French government has an excellent opportunity, it has to be seized, in returning as part of the peace process, and especially in relieving Nikol Pashinyan and in convincing him to open the South Corridor, to open the Zangezur component of the Southern Corridor, which will be highly appreciated in Azerbaijan, I think.
So it is also in the interest of France?
Obviously. I mean, because it will stabilize the region and it will open a way, a safe way for European Union in general and France in particular, for all the products coming from the East. So the development of the international trade is obviously in the interest of everybody. But it has to be seized. This opportunity has to be seized.
Indeed. Maxime, thank you. Thank you for joining IDD Talks. It was a real pleasure to talk with you.
For me too.
Thank you.